lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Indriyani mano buddhir asya dishtam uchate etir vimoha yatyesha jnanam avritya dehinam. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So we'll go back to text 39 or 29. But a nice point on this last verse is when someone is engaging in a battle, they need to know where the enemy is. Otherwise, there's no chance. So here, Krishna gives the secret tip of where the enemy is, this lust. He says, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So there we found out the location of the enemy, the mind, the senses, and the intelligence. So we can go to text 29. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Purport. Persons who are unknowledgeable falsely identify with gross material consciousness and are full of material designations. This body is a gift of the material nature, and one who is too much attached to the bodily consciousness is called mandan, or a lazy person without understanding of spirit soul. So I just wanted to make a point on this point of how persons who are unknowledgeable falsely identify with gross material consciousness and are full of material designations. So with these designations, there's no way to solve the actual problems of life. Like there's so many wars and so many difficulties between countries where they end up fighting each other, and so many lives are lost, and there's so many other problems that become involved. But as long as we have these material designations, then none of these wars or other smaller problems can be solved. Yes, Maharaj?
That's a good point. Just like in the Middle East, as long as someone thinks I'm Israeli or I'm Jewish or I'm Mohammedan or I'm from this country, then there's no possibility of peace. But if both parties can understand we're spirit souls, we're servants of God. If we're servants of God, let's figure out how we can work together to please God. Naturally, that's what servants of God do, because that's what God wants everyone to do.
Thank you. This is a really important point, because if we can cooperate with each other, then that's the Sankirtan movement. It's the congregational chanting of the holy name. So by cooperating, we can push on this movement, and actually the whole world can become like the spiritual world. People can know the goal of life and actually attain it by us all cooperating together for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So there's this point that I've seen Srila Prabhupada make, how the United Nations is like the main solution people try to make to these this disunity in the world, to try to make peace in the world. But if we look at this so-called United Nations, we see even this isn't solving it, because there's a new flag popping up every year. A new ununited flag is popping up. So if we look at what the basis of what all these different nations are striving for, all the different leaders, they show up at the United Nations. And so what is the basis of the good that they're trying to do? It's all pretty much for the self, whether it's, okay, it might be my country, but then what's the basis of that? It might be my community. And then the basis of that is my family. And the basis of that is myself. And so they're thinking that that's the body. But then what's the basis of the body? That's the mind. And then above that, that's the intelligence. And then the basis of where all that's coming from is the soul. So that's what they should strive to actually help. But then what's the basis of that soul, or where's that coming from? That's Krishna. So if they are actually knowing who is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then working to serve him, then naturally all these other things will be served nicely and work out nicely. because the beginning of the equation is correct. So if they're all working for the Supreme Lord Krishna, then those activities are perfect, because just like a math equation, if the beginning of it is good, then the rest of the equation can work out. But if the beginning is off, if there's some mix-up and some small little addition thing in the beginning of this whole big equation, even though you've got all the other types of math there, the whole thing can be messed up. So people need to work for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then that's the perfection of their work. Everything can come from that. So further in the purport, ignorant men think of the body as the self. Bodily connections with others are accepted as kinsmanship. The land in which the body is obtained is the object of worship, and the formalities of religious rituals are considered ends in themselves. Social work, nationalism, and altruism are some of the activities for such materially designated persons. Under the spell of such designations, they are always busy in the material field. For them, spiritual realization is a myth, and so they're not interested. So as long as we're in this material world, we're bound up by karmic activities. So we do one activity, and then that has a reaction. And then we are developing whatever our next body will be based on the activities we're doing in this body. So then from many, many lifetimes, we're piling up all these different reactions. We're just stuck in like a cycle of activities. So you do one activity and you get some reaction from that. So this karmic activity keeps one bound in the material world. So like Srila Prabhupada is saying, under the spell of such designations, they're always busy in the material field, and for them, spiritual realization is a myth. So people are trying to solve the problems of life by just engaging in more of these karmic activities, but it doesn't work because those activities are ultimately still under the material nature. So like, okay, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Daivi Hyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. He's explaining that this divine nature of mine is very, is that the right verse? This divine nature of mine is very difficult to overcome. So it's this nature or material energy is coming from Krishna. It's a divine energy keeping the rebellious souls in the material world. Yes, Maharaj?
But they're kept in the material world because they want to be kept in the material world. It's not that God puts them there against their will. If they want to go back to the spiritual world, they're free to go at any moment. It's not like they have to stay. He creates his Maya, this divine energy is the Maya, that's under his direction. It's like first thing when you do when you build a city, what do?
Make a prison house.
You have to make a prison or a jail because you know there's going to be people coming in. Someone might say, "Why are you building a jail? There's no criminals here. There's nobody in it. You're going to have an empty jail." I say, "It won't be empty long," because that's the nature. There are some people who don't want to follow the right laws, and that's the material world. That's all of us together, rebels. We're all here fighting it out for the wrong cause.
Thank you. So if we get the right cause, which is serving Krishna, then we can all work together to help everyone get out of this material world and back to their eternal, blissful life in the spiritual world. So material nature, or Maya, has this, or Durga. Durga is another meaning of Durga is fort. So this material world's like a prison house, and Maya has the thankless task of kicking the living entities, the ones who want to stay here. Like Maharaj was making the example of a warden in a prison the other day. He's ultimately seeing after the prison nicely, and those prisoners who are properly being reformed, he's helping them out. They can even get out sooner. The person's doing their job. They're not like a bad person, but they have this thankless task of looking over this prison. So the living entities struggle so much against this material nature, and we can try to make so many adjustments to make the world a more comfortable place to live in and things like this. But we see that material nature is just always kicking, reminding us that this isn't the place to be, and trying to compete with the Supreme Lord isn't the thing to do. But when we put Krishna in the center of all of our activities, then we actually can get out of this cycle of material activities, come back to our natural nature. Let's see, where were we? Such bewildered persons may even be engaged in such primary moral principles of life as non-violence and similar materially benevolent work. Those who are, however, enlightened in spiritual life should not try to agitate such materially engrossed persons. So someone may advocate for non-violence or something, but their, what is it called? Philanthropic activities, they're still within material nature. So this thing, or personality that is kicking everyone around and causing so many difficulties, you get pain from other living entities, pain from the own body and mind, pain from supernatural causes like the weather. This same thing, someone's trying to solve all the problems by working with this same energy. So it doesn't actually solve the problems. It's still Maya. It's still the material nature. But if we engage in something beyond material nature, which is Krishna's activities, because he's above nature, he's the one who's creating this material nature, then there can actually be peace and prosperity in all of these things. Yes, Maharaj?
Scientists say that the material science is the highest form of knowledge. They say it surpasses all scriptures and philosophies and faiths. These are not scientific. We have the ultimate scientific knowledge, but they can't explain consciousness. They can't explain life. They can't explain why living entities that are made of matter, why they have feelings. Matter, chemicals don't have feelings. Have you ever seen any chemicals that had feelings and emotions? No. So they have so many missing parts. They don't say how. Science does not give us any real information of how it all began. Where does the universe come from? Where does everything come from? They just say it came from the void. In my opinion, that's avoiding the issue. If you say everything came from the void, which means nothing, you're avoiding the issue. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the big theories is Darwin's theory of chemical evolution, saying that life came from just chemicals. But like, for instance, one scientist was saying, these are the chemicals that make life. So one devotee just questioned him and said, so if I give you these chemicals, can you make life? And he said, that I cannot say. So they give this answer, but it's a bogus answer. Or they'll say, in the future. We always hear this, we'll make life very soon in the future. But there's even this common saying that trust no promise, however, what is it?
Trust no future, however pleasant.
Trust no future, however pleasant. So
trust no future, however pleasant.
Trust no future, however pleasant. So they might promise this very nice promise, but it's like a post-dated check. So you say, okay, you're claiming that life is being made from chemicals, so can you make some really simple form of life, maybe a fly or an ant or a blade of grass, something really simple. And they say, okay, in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or next year, but it's a post-dated check, so you shouldn't trust it, no matter how pleasant. Shri Shri Gauranitai Ki Jai. So, and then also with this theory of chemical evolution, it doesn't make sense because one of the ideas of it is that the living entities are, a monkey evolves into a human being. So, or in other species, they evolve into other species. But it doesn't actually work because we can see that all these species are still there. There's human beings, And so if something is developing, then the less developed thing would change into the better thing, and the less developed thing is gone. But the monkeys are there, the human beings are there. We don't see any human beings or any monkeys giving birth to human beings, or anything like this. So it doesn't actually hold up in many ways. And then this main thing, if we give them the chemicals, they can't make life just from those chemicals.
We have bones for dinosaurs.
We have bones for dinosaurs. Well, how many bones for dinosaurs do we have? I heard there weren't that many really actually dinosaur bones discovered. So these things are there, but it's not very concrete, these ideas to support these theories, like Darwin's theory. Are there any other claims that this theory claims for how life comes from chemicals? Darwin's theory, does anyone? Yes, so we can see it doesn't really hold up. But actually, Krishna explains that he is the seed-giving father of all living entities. That's explained here in the Bhagavad Gita. So material nature is making all of these bodies. They're there in nature, and the soul can take shelter of these different bodies. And Krishna is the thing that's creating, he's the person who's creating all of them. And also, to take a person out of the picture doesn't make sense, because we see anything in this world that has some person that makes it. Like, so if we look at the whole universe, everything is functioning perfectly. The sun comes up just at the right time every day. It's at the perfect distance to make just enough heat and light for us to live. Same with the moon, it's doing its thing with the tides and the vegetables and giving them life, and plants and all of this stuff. It's all calculated just perfectly, just like a gigantic Rolex watch, but even much nicer. So if a watch that has all this precision needs some expert craftsman behind it, then what to speak of the whole universe? And if we're seeing that the universe works like a big machine, well, who's the operator of that machine, or who's that person? So these ideas of just some chemical evolution, Darwin's theory, void, and all this, it doesn't make sense if we just look at it for some time and put it to test against better knowledge, like what's given in the Bhagavad Gita. Those who are, however, enlightened in spiritual life should not try to agitate such materially engrossed persons. Better to prosecute one's own spiritual activities silently. So, if people do their work, whatever that work may be, in whatever platform of life that they're in, whatever position they're in, if they do their work for Krishna, giving the fruit of their results, like if someone's working some sort of job, they give the fruits of those results to the person whom everything is coming from, Krishna, then that same material work, actually, the thing that's binding them in more karmic activities, getting entangled in many reactions, actually begins to liberate them. So that's the idea of karma yoga that Krishna is explaining in this chapter. If we do work for him, we actually become liberated from all of this action and reaction. And we just read that better to prosecute one's own spiritual activities silently. We understand that the devotees of the Lord are also very merciful like the Lord. So we do our duties and we don't disturb people, but at the same time, a devotee tries to be merciful in helping someone actually become Krishna conscious, come back to their original state of life. So that involves going out and speaking to people, or doing Harinam, chanting the holy name. And this way, if we give people transcendental knowledge, that can solve all of the problems of life, because we're getting to the root of the problem, which is that we're here in this body, in this material world, trying to enjoy separately or compete with Krishna, the source of all living entities. So we can go to the next text. Oh wait, there's more purport. Haribo. Men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness. And therefore Lord Krishna advises us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. But the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being. So this is the position of the devotees of the Lord. Like the 6 Goswamis, they were giving their whole life to spread Krishna consciousness. They scrutinizingly studied all of the different revealed scriptures to give the essence of them for the benefit of all living entities. And they were liked by both the gentle people and the rude people. In the prayers of the 6 Goswamis, it's Dira, Dira, Jana, Priyo, Priyakaro, Nirmatsaro, Pujito. Both the Dira and the Adira. So the Dira, the gentle people, or the sober persons, and the Adira, the ruffians, or the rude people. They were liked by both because they weren't envious of anyone. So that's the position of a devotee. Just like Narada Muni, Deva Rshi, the sage of the demigods. He's not a demigod, he's a eternally liberated being, but has like this form of a demigod. But Narada Muni, he's traveling all over the world. There's another nice song for him. And he's spreading this Krishna conscious knowledge to all the living entities and helping them advance in spiritual consciousness. But both the demoniac personalities and the saintly personalities, they like Narada Muni, because also he's not envious of anyone. And it seems as though he's neutral. His ultimate cause is for Krishna and bringing living entities back to Krishna. And that's in everyone's best interest. But even to those demoniac personalities who don't like Krishna, they also like Narada Muni, because he's not envious and he's just looking out for the welfare of all living entities. And here's the next text. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with mind intent on me, and without desire for gain and free from egoism and lethargy, fight. Purport. This verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties as if in military discipline. Such an injunction may make things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with dependence on Krishna, because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. We see this dependence on Krishna in the example of Draupadi, which happened before this battle of Kurukshetra, being spoken of in the Bhagavad Gita. One of the things that Queen Kunti, the mother of the 5 Pandavas, prays to Krishna, she prays to Krishna that you saved us from a poisoned cake. You saved us from a burning palace that was made of lac. It's very flammable. You saved us in the vicious assembly, the assembly of these rude people. So this vicious assembly, or this assembly of rude men that she was talking about, when she's praying to Krishna, sorry, there's just one other detail that's interesting there. Those are all very distressful things, but she prays to Krishna for more of these distressful things, because she's saying, in this state, this distressed state, I'm thinking of you more. We see you. When these distresses are there, we see you. So there's no problem. But this vicious assembly she was talking about was at the beginning of this battle of Kurukshetra, one of the things that sparked it. So Draupadi, a great devotee of the Lord, she was the wife of the 5 Pandavas, and in this assembly there were great personalities like Drona and Bhishma and Karna, and they were on the side gambling against the Pandavas. And when Draupadi was to be married some time ago, she could choose her own husband, but there were still some strictures of how she would do it. She was very qualified, so in that time, since she's so qualified, she could choose her own husband, and there was a way that they would do it where her father had placed a fish hanging from something on the ceiling, and there was also something kind of blocking the fish, and then there's a pot of water or something reflective in the ground, and someone has to be able to, or the water pot might not have been there, I don't exactly remember. But someone has to be able to shoot the eye of a fish with an arrow and hit it, even though there's something blocking it, and they may have to aim at it through a reflection. So Arjuna was there, and Karna was also there, who was born from Queen Kunti, but there's so many details. But because this was before her marriage, it was covered up that Karna was the son of Queen Kunti, and it was made to look like he was the son of a carpenter. So Draupadi said, these only Kshatriyas can come and compete for my hand. I don't want any carpenters coming here to do this. So in this way, Karna wasn't allowed to compete to win the hand of Draupadi, and he was very much envious and all sorts of other bad feelings about this. And so Arjuna won this competition, and the 5 Pandavas, they married Draupadi, but that's a whole nother story. But when they were at this assembly of these great personalities, and there was this gambling match between Duryodhana and Maharaj Yudhishthira, and they lost everything. Eventually, they also lost Draupadi, and Karna was there. And so he was thinking, or he was saying, now let us see the naked beauty of Draupadi. So they're so despicable that even in this time when there's very respectable persons, it's not like Kali Yuga where everything is so degraded and there's like seeing a naked person is almost like a normal thing in Kali Yuga on some advertisement or something. But at this time, when people actually have these nice, respectable qualities, Karna, he was so degraded, and he was saying, let's see the naked beauty of Draupadi. So they went to try to pull the sari off of Draupadi. And at first, she clung to it. But then, and she was calling out to Krishna, saying, hey, Govinda! But she eventually realized, what power do I have to protect myself? What strength, what am I going to do? So she eventually, without making any more endeavor for her own protection, she just threw her arms up in the air and called out to Krishna, thinking, Krishna, whatever you want, that can happen. If you want to protect me, you can protect me. If you don't, that's also fine. I'm surrendered unto you. She said, hey, Govinda! So this is a nice example of the surrender of a devotee. And Krishna, hearing that call and that selfless surrender, reciprocated with Draupadi, and he appeared in a very rare incarnation, sari incarnation. He created unlimited sari, so that there's so much cloth. Karna's pulling, and eventually there's this pile of cloth, and they gave up, because Krishna is creating this unlimited cloth. So this is a nice example of the surrender of a devotee. They're depending fully on Krishna. It's not that a devotee just gives up making any endeavor, but it's that they endeavor only for Krishna. So Krishna's the whole goal, and the result is totally up to him. Just like Lord Chaitanya also prays that you can not appear before me or leave me brokenhearted or hurt me by your embrace or whatever it is. Krishna is free to do whatever he wants because he's my worshipable Lord forever. That's the prayer that Lord Chaitanya is saying in the Shikshashtakam. So that's the position of a devotee. They just want to do what will please Krishna and fully surrender unto him in that way. So we can read more of the purport. The living entity cannot be happy independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord, because the eternal constitutional position of the living entity is to become subordinate to the desires of the Lord. Arjuna was therefore ordered by Sri Krishna to fight as if the Lord were his military commander. One has to sacrifice everything for the good will of the Supreme Lord, and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. I like this point of without claiming proprietorship. It's not that we go and do some service, say, okay, I cleaned this many pots, or I distributed this many books, or I mopped this many square feet. Now, how much do I get? But it's without claiming any proprietorship over the result. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute his order. The Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Soul without personal consideration, or in other words, one who is fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetasa. Nirashi means that one has to act on the order of the Master. On this point where without personal consideration that we had just read, they're depending wholly and solely on the Supreme Lord without personal consideration. There's a nice verse, and I'm sorry that I'm not remembering the whole verse, but there's one that starts off in the Bhagavad Gita explaining that consideration for like personal sense gratification should be completely kicked out. Sorry, I'm not remembering where this verse is, but it's sometimes I just remember that one little snippet of it, that pretty much this consideration of, oh, wait a second, what about me and my senses and the comfort of my senses? That idea, we just totally kick it out, and then there's so much more room and energy and focus for thinking of the service that we're going to do and praying to Krishna that we can do it even though we don't have any qualification to do it. But as long as, if we have to think of sense gratification or maintaining our senses beyond just what is needed to do the service for Krishna, then there's so much extra energy and things has to be spent. Yes, Maharaj?
Even Harry Truman said, it's amazing what can be accomplished if no one wants to take the credit. You don't care who gets the credit.
That's really nice. So that's a nice thing about serving Krishna is we're all on the same team because Krishna is in the center. So yeah, if we don't actually care who gets the credit, if the credit's going to Krishna, then yeah, so much can be done. It's really nice. Like Bhakta Jio and Bhakta Damodar and I went to the mall today to distribute books. And Bhakta Jio and myself, we didn't personally give so many books away to people, putting them in their hands, and didn't personally receive so many donations that we took and then put in a fanny pack or a pocket. But as a whole, it was a very ecstatic experience because when Damodar was talking to someone at some sort of like a anti-aging cream store, he gave them the whole set of Prabhupada's books, and this guy was so happy to give him $100. So it felt like the whole activity was a success. We found this very favorable guy, and he reciprocated so nicely and took all the books. So we were all really satisfied. So if we serve Krishna, then we all become satisfied. In the Hitopanishad, there's these little kind of allegorical things that Srila Prabhupada references. Hitopadesh, that's what it is. And one of them is explaining how at one point all the limbs of the body, they're serving the stomach, but then they say, wait a second, we're doing all this work and the stomach's just eating. Actually, we're going to try to enjoy on our own. So the hand tries to enjoy the food on its own and this and that, but then they start to die and shrivel up. They're not getting any satisfaction. Because it's only if those limbs give that food to the stomach, then they also become satisfied because the stomach distributes it to the whole body. So like that, if we endeavor just for our own personal satisfaction, we'll shrivel up like the hand trying to enjoy the food on its own. But if we endeavor for Krishna's satisfaction and give everything to him, it's just like supplying the food to the stomach and everyone becomes satisfied. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Bhakta Jio, Prabhu? there's one sentence right here. Oh, okay.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to say how nice it was that you said that if we endeavor for Krishna and not for ourselves, then it's more fruitful. And I'm learning this because like some days it'll be rough, you know, especially when I go out in books. It's rough sometimes, but when you give that credit to Krishna and you say and you pray to him and you're just like, okay, even though I didn't do this so nicely, I'm still thankful for what you did and or what you're putting in my path. If you're able to say that, then there's no loss, because even if you don't distribute a whole bunch of books, like your attitude is still intact, you know? So it's like, it's nice to think about that. I think a lot of people should meditate more on this because it helps. It definitely helps with struggles in life and things like that. So I just wanted to share that. That was a really nice point that you made. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Even if there's not some big, like, numerical result from some service that we're doing, it's actually really great because we're being engaged in Krishna's service in that moment, which is really rare. It's a really amazing thing that we're being given, which is devotional service. So the fact that we're there and we're doing it is already really wonderful. And one more thing on the result is this is just in the next few sentences. That's really nice. Nor should one ever expect fruit of results. The cashier may count millions of dollars for his employer, but he does not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one has to realize that nothing in the world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. I'm going to finish the rest of the purport. It's really nice. That is the real purport of Mayi, or unto me. And when one acts in such Krishna consciousness, certainly he does not claim proprietorship over anything. This consciousness is called nirmama, or nothing is mine. And if there is any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of so-called kinsmen in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigata jvara, or without feverish mentality or lethargy. Everyone, according to his quality and position, has a particular type of work to discharge, and all such duties may be discharged in Krishna consciousness as described above. That will lead one to the path of liberation. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Bhakti Avatar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I guess this isn't like exactly in relation, but I was kind of been thinking recently, not in relation to the class, so forgive me, but if one is instructed something and he doesn't necessarily fully understand the instruction, like why he's being instructed in that way, does one need to know why, or does just having faith, is that sufficient to carry out that order?
Well, it's helpful to understand why. If one can just carry out some order, that could be very productive. But we can also ask, what is the whole, maybe not the whole plan behind it, but what is the reason for it, and then we can understand it. If that might be needed to satisfy our mind, so then we can actually execute it nicely. Yes, Magadari Prabhu.
Can I make a
Yeah,
comment
that'd be
to that?
great. Thank you.
There's many devotees that are described as having simple faith. So they determine that they have the proper authority, and then whatever the authority says, they just do it. because they already did their research to find out that he was the one to listen to. So that's there. But if we're on the point, if we're not on that level, then we should know that we got to do something to try to get there. And when we ask why in the right attitude or as submissive, when we want to have faith in them and the authority, we may ask them why. Then when they give us a very sound answer with all logic and reason and considerations from so many different angles, then we say, wow, I have such a nice authority. I should do what he says. That's there. So the attitude of inquiry is also mentioned many times in Gita.
Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.